In 2011, a young man in Karachi submitted his first business idea to 3 investors. All 3 said no. One of them laughed. His family told him to get a proper job. His friends quietly agreed. 7 years later, that same idea was running in 14 cities and employing 63 people. This is not a story about luck. It's not a story about talent. It's a story about what you do with the word no, and what it actually means when the whole world says you're wrong. Because sometimes, being told you're wrong is the most important thing that ever happens to you. Chapter 1. The moment everyone decides. There is a moment in every ambitious person's life. Not always dramatic, not always obvious, but always real, where the world says, "This isn't for you." Sometimes it says it loudly. A rejection letter, a failed exam, a business that doesn't survive its first year. Sometimes it says it quietly, through the expressions of people you respect, through the soft, well-meaning advice to be realistic, through the silence where encouragement should have been. In every case, the moment asks a question. And the question is always the same. Do you believe the world, or do you believe yourself? This audiobook is about the people who chose themselves, not out of arrogance, not because they were certain of success, but because something inside them understood a truth that the world's verdict could not override. Failure is information. It is not a conclusion. Chapter 2. What no actually means. Omar was 23 when he first heard no. He had spent 8 months developing an idea for a logistics platform that would connect small retailers in Karachi to affordable delivery services. Not glamorous, not a social media app, just a practical solution to a real problem he saw every day in his neighborhood, where small shop owners were losing business because they couldn't afford the delivery infrastructure that larger competitors had. He presented the idea to 3 investors through a contact he'd made at a business conference. The first said the market was too small. The second said the technology would be too difficult to implement. The third said, and this is the one Omar still thinks about, years later, this is a nice idea for a school project. And then he laughed. Omar walked out of that meeting and sat in his car for 45 minutes without starting the engine. Not crying, just sitting, processing. Here is what he was feeling, though he didn't have words for it yet. He was trying to determine whether the investors were right, or whether they were just seeing a small version of something that was actually large. Because those are 2 completely different situations, and from the outside, they look identical. A bad idea that nobody wants looks exactly like a great idea that nobody understands yet. The only way to tell the difference, and this is the thing nobody tells you, is to keep going long enough to find out. Chapter 3. The Anatomy of a No. Over the following weeks, Omar did something that most people who receive rejection don't do. He studied the no. Not wallowed in it, not dismissed it, studied it. He went back to each investor, not to argue or to pitch again, but to ask one honest question. Specifically, what did you see that made you doubt this? 2 of them responded, 1 didn't. From those conversations, he extracted 3 legitimate criticisms. 1, his cost model was wrong. He hadn't accurately calculated the per-delivery economics, and at the price point he'd proposed, the platform wouldn't be profitable at small scale. 2, his technology plan was vague. He described what the platform would do without describing how it would do it, which told sophisticated investors that he might not know. 3, he had no pilot data. He was asking people to invest in a hypothesis. No test, no users, no evidence beyond his own conviction. These were real problems, not fatal ones but real. Here is what Omar understood that changed everything. A no is a diagnosis, not a death sentence. A doctor who tells you what's wrong with you is not your enemy. They are giving you information you need to fix the problem. An investor who tells you why they won't fund you is doing the same thing. The answer to a diagnosis is not despair. It is treatment. Omar spent the next 4 months fixing every specific problem the no had revealed. He rebuilt his cost model from scratch. He hired a technical co-founder, a university friend studying software engineering, who could make the technology plan concrete. He ran a manual pilot. Using WhatsApp groups, spreadsheets, and a rented motorcycle, he connected 15 small shops in one Karachi neighborhood to a basic delivery service for 60 days. At the end of 60 days, he had real data, real users, real proof. And he wrote a completely different business plan. Chapter 4: The Second Round. The second round of pitches was different. Not because Omar was more confident, though he was. Not because the idea was more polished, though it was. It was different because Omar had done something the first time he hadn't. He had shown up with proof instead of hope. Hope is a wonderful thing, but investors and the world in general responds more to evidence. 2 of the 3 original investors passed again. One of them had a more thoughtful reason this time. She was focused on a different sector and wasn't the right fit. But a 4th investor, someone at a small startup fund that Omar's technical co-founder had a connection to, asked for a second meeting. That meeting lasted 90 minutes. At the end of it, the investor said something that Omar had never heard before in the context of his business. "I think this could work." The initial investment was small enough to hire one person and formalize the technology, not a life-changing sum, not a validation that everything was going to be fine, but a beginning. Beginnings don't always feel like beginnings. They often feel like very small steps forward after a very long time of standing still. The music doesn't swell. There's no montage. You just go from nothing to something very small, and then you have to make that something very small into something real. Omar did. Chapter 5: The Long Middle. This is the part of success stories that gets skipped in the retelling. The long middle. The months and years between the first breakthrough and the visible success. The part where the investors aren't watching, the press isn't writing, and the friends and family who doubted you haven't yet changed their minds. The part where you are just working, solving problems, making mistakes, fixing them, hearing people, losing people, learning things nobody taught you because there was no class that covered them. Omar spent 3 years in the long middle. He had investors but not enough money, a product that worked but not smoothly enough, customers who were happy but not quite loyal enough, a team that was talented but stretched too thin. Every week presented a new problem he hadn't anticipated. The delivery riders kept leaving for better pay elsewhere. He had to build a loyalty system. Local regulatory issues in one city meant the platform needed to operate differently there. A competitor launched with better funding and tried to undercut his prices. He had to compete on service quality instead. In the long middle, Omar developed something that the first version of him, the 23-year-old sitting in a car after being laughed at, did not have. He developed judgment. Not theory, not frameworks. Real judgment, the kind you can only build by making hundreds of decisions under pressure and seeing what happens. By being wrong and learning to recognize the pattern of wrong before the damage was too great. By being right and not letting it make you overconfident. Judgment is the invisible asset. It doesn't appear on a CV. It can't be taught in a business school. But it is the difference between the entrepreneur who builds once and the one who can build again and again. Because even when things fail, the judgment remains. Chapter 6: The Moment the World Changed Its Mind. Year 5. 14 cities, 63 employees, a platform that had processed over 1 million deliveries, a second round of investment that valued the company at something that would have seemed like science fiction to the investor who laughed. Omar was invited to speak at a startup conference in Karachi, the same kind of event where, years earlier, he'd been a nervous attendee taking notes and hoping someone would believe in him. After his talk, a young woman approached him. She was 24, holding a laptop, clearly nervous. "I have an idea," she said, "but everyone tells me it's not going to work." Omar looked at her for a moment. "Tell me the idea," he said. She did. "Your cost model is off," he told her. "Your technology plan is vague, and you have no pilot data." She looked discouraged. "But the core idea," he said, "is real. I can see the problem you're solving. Now go build the proof." He paused. "Come back in 6 months." She did. And this time she came back with data. Epilogue: what failure really is. Everyone who eventually succeeds at something difficult has a story about the moment they were told they wouldn't. Not because the world is cruel, though sometimes it is, but because the world makes decisions based on what it can see. And vision, real vision, is seeing what isn't there yet, seeing the company in the idea, the writer in the rough draft, the athlete in the beginner, the life in the seed. The people who told Omar no were not wrong to see what they saw. They saw an unproven idea with real problems. That was accurate. What they couldn't see, what nobody could see except Omar, was that those problems were solvable. That the person standing in front of them was not someone asking the world to believe in a finished thing. He was someone asking for the chance to build it. The world said no. He built it anyway. And years later, the world said yes. This is the pattern. Not always. Not in every case. Some ideas are bad and the no is right. But the only way to find out, the only way to know whether you're carrying a bad idea or a beginning, is to refuse to let someone else's doubt become your conclusion. Study the no, fix the problem, keep going. Because the world's verdict is not final. Only yours is.